It began with a voice that had been silent for years, but never again. Inside a packed courtroom, the hollow click of shoes on polished wood sounded like a metronome. Kristi McBee rose from her seat and walked toward the witness stand. No cameras were allowed, but had there been, every lens would have fixed on her. The woman who had stood quietly at the edge of a complicated marriage, now stepping into the harsh, clarifying light of justice. She wore a dark navy blazer, hair pulled back with purposeful neatness. In one hand, she clutched a folder, thick with bank statements, emails, and contracts, the paper trail of a life invested, and, she would soon argue, deliberately erased. Her eyes did not falter. Not when she moved past Galyna Saltkovska, seated beside Steven McBee Sr., not when she met Steven's gaze. The man who once vowed equality and spiritual dignity, now sitting stone-faced and withdrawn. Kristi lowered the microphone a fraction and addressed the judge. Her voice was steady, but under it ran a current of sorrow and long-suppressed anger. "Your Honor," she began, "I stand before this court to reclaim what was promised to me, not only as a wife, but as a woman, a mother, and a partner." She paused, and the courtroom seemed to inhale with her. "I want what's mine. I am not stepping back." A ripple of murmurs cut through the gallery. Viewers had watched the family's private life unfold on television. Loyalty and discord, faith and fracture, moments of tenderness filmed beside moments of public scandal. But none of that mattered now. Today was about Sycamore Ridge, a 12-acre parcel they had been told would become 4 homes, one for each wife. It was supposed to be legacy, not leverage. Kristi unfolded a page. "This," she said, holding it up, "is an August 14, 2018 payment from my business account into what was represented as a family trust for Sycamore Ridge. And yet my name is not on the deed." She produced another document, an email from the real estate broker confirming her investment interest. Then a copy of the production agreement, a contract showing that earnings from filming and related ventures were to support their shared future. Her lawyer nodded gently. "When Steven and I legally restructured our marriage years ago so he could adopt, I did so trusting that spiritual equality would remain. I did not anticipate being made invisible." Kristi's voice tightened. That promise was a lie. Across the room, Steven's jaw tightened. Galyna Saltkovska shifted uneasily. The defense rose, insisting Kristi's role had been spiritual, not financial. Kristi almost smiled, a small, bitter thing. "Spiritual?" she scoffed quietly. "I paid taxes on land I did not own. I deposited funds into a joint account. I raised a child. I built a life that made those enterprises possible." Outside, reporters gathered at the courthouse steps, hungry for every detail. Inside, Kristi and another sister wife, Janelle, sat side by side, no longer rivals on a reality show, but allies who had been pushed to the margins of their own lives. Their faces had aged, but their eyes held the same hard ember. Betrayal had forged them into something different. Evidence followed evidence. Transfers, emails, a land transfer filing that showed 2 names, Steven and Galyna Saltkovska, where 4 had been promised. One email, read aloud, contained the cold line, "Better if we finalize everything before they notice." Gasps moved like a current through the gallery. The defense called it circumstantial. Kristi's attorney called it deliberate. "This isn't merely about acreage," Kristi said, voice calm and unadorned. "It's about dignity. It's about a covenant kept in words, but broken in law." She detailed payments she had made, nights she had sacrificed, opportunities she had deferred, all in the hope that shared promises would be honored. When cross-examination turned to motive, Steven's posture shifted from confident patriarch to defensive witness. "I advanced funds," he insisted. "I managed distribution." But the paper trail told a different story. Blurred accounts, commingled earnings, and decades of labor performed largely by women whose contributions were now being minimized in court. By the time Kristi stepped down from the stand, the room had changed. She hadn't come for spectacle. She had come to be seen. For years she had been asked to smile, to remain small, to wait her turn. On that day, she drew a line in the dirt and refused to move. Outside the courthouse, she made her statement quietly. "I didn't come to hurt anyone. I came to stop being erased." The cameras clicked. Supportive voices rose on social media. But Kristi didn't seek vindication for applause. She wanted justice and, finally, to reclaim a future that had been promised in words and stolen in deeds. Within a tense courtroom, the sound of footsteps echoed as Kristi McBee rose from her seat and walked toward the witness stand. No cameras were permitted, but had there been, every single lens would have been fixed on her. The woman who had once stood quietly in the shadows of her husband's ambitions was now walking into the spotlight of justice. She wore a dark navy blazer, her blonde hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot. In her hand, a folder bulged with documents, evidence from decades of sacrifice, of keeping her family together, and of giving more than she had ever received in return. Her eyes never blinked. Not when she passed by the family members sitting stiffly on Steven's side. Not even when she locked eyes with the man who had once promised her partnership, love, and respect. Promises that had faded into control and dismissal. Kristi adjusted the microphone, lowered it slightly, and fixed her gaze first on the judge, then on the room. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but edged with years of buried anger and sorrow. "I stand here today to reclaim what was owed to me, not only as a wife, but as a woman, as a mother, as a human being." She glanced briefly at Steven McBee Sr., who sat with his jaw tight, arms folded in defiance. "I want what's mine," Kristi continued, her voice rising, "and I'm not backing down." A low murmur rippled through the gallery. For years, Kristi had been the quiet, loyal partner, the woman who shouldered responsibilities, while Steven's world revolved around his own pursuits. Outwardly, the McBee family had looked successful, united, prosperous. But behind the doors, love had grown conditional, promises had been broken, and Kristi's sacrifices had gone unnoticed. But today was different. Today was about the land, acres of property that were supposed to represent a family's legacy, a promise of equal investment and equal future. It was more than dirt and grass. To Kristi, it symbolized fairness. It symbolized dignity. Yet her name had been erased from the paperwork. She lifted a page from her folder. "This," she said, holding it high, "is a financial transfer from my business account into the family trust. Money that was meant to secure this property for us all. And yet, my name was never included on the deed." Her lawyer nodded beside her, urging her forward. "This," Kristi added, brandishing another sheet, "is an email from our broker confirming my contributions. And this," she raised the final page, her voice tight, "is a copy of the contract we both signed, agreeing that all income and shared investments would secure this future together." She turned her eyes on Steven. "When I sacrificed my independence, when I gave up my own financial opportunities to support your dreams, I did so under the belief that we were equals. That was a lie." Steven shifted uncomfortably, but Kristi pressed on. "I spent decades in this marriage. I raised children. I helped build businesses. I supported a lifestyle that came at the expense of my own. And now I've been told, indirectly, quietly, and cruelly, that I am not worthy of even a piece of what I helped build." Her voice wavered for the first time. She gripped the edge of the stand. "I surrendered my legal power. I surrendered my voice. But I will not surrender my dignity." Behind her, supporters nodded, women who knew her pain, who had lived in similar shadows. The judge, a calm woman in her 60s, leaned forward. "Mrs. McBee," she asked, "are you claiming that this property was always meant to be equally divided between you and your husband?" "Yes, Your Honor," Kristi answered firmly. "That was the agreement. Financially, emotionally, legally, spiritually, on every level, it was a partnership. until he chose to rewrite the truth. The judge jotted down a note, her expression unreadable. Steven's lawyer rose, dismissing Kristi's testimony as emotional rather than financial. But her attorney was ready, standing tall in her defense. With all due respect, this marriage was not a corporation Steven alone built. It was a family, with blurred finances, shared labor, and shared sacrifice. My client was not merely a bystander. She was an unpaid partner in a decades-long enterprise that gave Mr. McBee everything he claims as his own. Outside, reporters gathered on the courthouse steps, waiting. Inside, the air was thick with silence. Once, Kristi had looked at Steven with love, with loyalty, with hope. Now, she looked at him like a man she no longer recognized, the man who had taken everything. And for the first time in decades, she was ready to take something back. The testimony ended, but the battle had only just begun. The following days were a blur of legal jargon and cross-examinations. Kristi's lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Galyna, laid out a case with surgical precision, dissecting Steven's narrative of a self-made empire. She called Kristi's business partners, former employees, and even the family's old accountant, all of whom confirmed Kristi's integral role in the success of Steven's ventures.